I mean, look, I lost the same 100 plus pounds 3 times, and I don't know how many dozens of smaller yo-yos I did in between. So, coming from personal experience, hit me, producer Potts.
So, Dr. Sarah, we've just spent the last 4 videos talking about the science behind health at any size, calories in, calories out, how to lose weight if that's a goal for us. Like, we've talked about all of this. Something that you brought up in your videos was talking about the on again, off again roller coaster, the yo-yo dieting that so many of us can relate to. Is there a harm in yo-yo dieting itself?
Yes, the more times you yo-yo, the more lost weight, gained weight back cycles you go through, the higher your risk of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And in fact, studies show that yo-yo dieters have higher risks for those health problems than if they had never tried to lose weight in the first place and had just maintained their higher weight. Here's some statistics. This comes from a 2018 study, and it shows that yo-yo dieters had a 43% higher risk for heart attack, a 41% higher risk for stroke, and a 2.27 times higher risk for all-cause mortality after adjusting for age, sex, smoking, alcohol, regular exercise, income, baseline fasting blood glucose, systolic blood pressure, total cholesterol, and body mass index. So that like losing weight, gaining it back, the on again, off again diet roller coaster, each cycle of the yo-yo magnifies our risk. And because I have it in front of me now, because I'm looking at my notes, also increases risk of depression and developing an eating disorder. There's some really interesting like biological mechanisms behind this. So just looking at like metabolic health risks, so risk of type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease, a lot of that has to do with the shifts in body composition with each cycle. So when we're in the like downward trajectory of the yo-yo, right, we're losing weight, it is extraordinarily difficult to only lose fat. So most of the time, you will lose some muscle and some fat and some water weight, right, as you're losing weight. So, and depending on the dietary structure, right, how most weight loss diets are pitched to you, you're going to lose almost a pound per pound, right? That is a really common effect, losing weight the way most weight loss diets are. As a quick aside, to help maintain lean mass through weight loss, 2 really important things. One is exercise, so especially including some strength training. And the second one is higher protein intake. So those can help to reduce how much muscle is lost in the weight loss phase. But the other thing that happens in yo-yo dieting is when we hit that moment where like, I give in, I can't do this anymore, this sucks, and we are disinhibited. That is such a hard word to say. We are disinhibited and we feel like we don't have control. The upward momentum of the yo-yo now begins. It is much easier to put on energy stores, right? To put on fat than muscle. So what happens is the more cycles you go through, the more your body composition shifts towards less lean mass, less muscle mass, and higher fat stores, especially higher fat stores around our organs, which is the higher like risk fat stores. So every single cycle, we're shifting body composition towards one that increases risk for cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes. So the thing that's driving the yo-yo, and the thing that then is increasing the risk for the mental health challenges, is restriction, right? So the way most weight loss diets are pitched is you are going to obsessively count something that increases the stress response. So monitoring food intake just by itself, but especially when we have to count something, counting calories, counting carb grams, whatever it is, that increases stress. But the restrictive mindset, right? This list of foods that I'm not allowed to eat, right? These foods that I miss, that I feel deprived of. That increases food fixation, food obsessions. It magnifies cravings, and it increases our susceptibility to emotional eating. What happens over time, especially if you have a big energy deficit and you're also increasing your hunger hormone ghrelin, so you're hungrier between meals and you are less satisfied after your meals, especially with that higher energy deficit causing a slowdown of our metabolisms. So we're burning fewer calories, especially if you're losing lean mass, because muscle burns more calories than fat tissue, right? So all of that adaptation is happening with that restrictive mindset. Is eventually you hit that moment of disinhibition, right? That moment where you had a bad day and now your increased susceptibility to emotional eating is playing out, or you slept like dog poop last night, and now that lack of sleep is magnifying your hunger that much more, and now it's just like too much hunger to be able to control how much you're eating, right? So you hit this moment where you're breaking a rule, even if that's a not great rule, right? It doesn't matter, you're breaking a rule, and now suddenly we feel like we just don't have control. It feels like all of our health behaviors are unraveling. And that is what is driving the yo-yo, right? So that's what drives the like weight regain. And if you've also had a really big energy deficit, so you've lowered your metabolism by a large amount, now it takes even fewer calories to gain the weight back, right? So it becomes easier to gain that weight back, and impossible, right? Impossible to maintain that diet. Like it's not willpower. It's not whether or not you're committed or dedicated, right? It's not a matter of strength. It is a matter of psychological and physiological adaptations that make it impossible to sustain, impossible to continue.
And this is why you talk about Nutrivore, right?
Yes.
Like the fact that you call there's quality of life foods and you call Nutrivore sustainable eating, because let's say I'm having a day, I eat healthy, whatever that means for each person, that's different. And then I eat something that I would normally categorize as a bad food for me. Instead of falling off the wagon and letting all my health patterns follow with it, which is what I used to do as well. Now with adapting Nutrivore, it's there. It doesn't derail me. It's just seen as a quality of life food. I'm enjoying it for what it is. I'm not stressing about it. And then that way I keep all the rest of my healthy behaviors. And my next meal, I'm right back to eating something that's healthy for me. So it's like, it stops that whole process by just not labeling it as bad.
Yeah. It actually, I would say, goes a step farther. So it takes those foods that you think of as like cheat foods, right? Or like junk food, right? Like bad foods, right? It takes that group of foods and doesn't just make them okay to eat, views them as a necessary tool for sustainable nutrition. So we intentionally make room for those foods so that we're getting enough joy from our diets that we can stick to those overall healthier eating patterns. Now, one of the tricks, because I think that when we come from restriction, right? We come from like, I've done these yo-yos. I mean, look, I lost the same 100 plus pounds 3 times. And I don't know how many dozens of smaller yo-yos I did in between. So coming from personal experience, the value of Nutrivore is that it's not restrictive and that it's permissive, but it still focuses on more nutrient-dense, nourishing foods. So we're meeting our nutritional needs from our diets. So one of the tricks to incorporating those delicious, right, quality of life foods that maybe in the past we often felt like I can't even have that in the house, because if I had it in the house, I'm going to eat the whole box, right? Like those foods. The way we do that is by focusing on the nutritionally important foods to add, and by crafting nourishing, filling, and satisfying meals, and making sure that we're getting 3 meals a day. So a lot of what can be driving disinhibition is like being hangry, basically. So inadequate food earlier in the day can cause us to overeat and not feel like we have control and give into cravings more at the end of the day. Not getting enough sleep can make that worse. Living too sedentary of a lifestyle can make that worse. Overtraining can also make that worse. So having that happy medium of exercise. But so a big thing here is crafting our plates so that we get used to the eating pattern that is filling half of our plates with fruits and vegetables, ideally about a 2-to-1 ratio of vegetables to fruit. And we're talking culinary vegetables and fruit. So tomatoes and cucumbers and pumpkin all fall into the vegetable side of the plate. Fruit is really referring to sweet fruits. If you don't like those with your meals, you can put those in your snacks instead if that's a more familiar eating pattern for you. Then a quarter of our plate is a slow burning starchy food. So ideally a whole food, fibrous starchy food like beans or root vegetables or whole grains. And then a quarter of our food is a protein food, or a quarter of our plate rather is a protein food. So that could be meat, seafood, it could be a plant protein, right? It could be eggs. And when we craft more of our meals that way, and then, so that is the balance, that is the nourishing, that is the filling. The satisfying comes from preparing those foods in ways we enjoy. So roasting those vegetables, right? Or adding a dressing to our salad. Adding like spices and herbs, right? Seasonings, like making all of those foods, like or all of those like really nutritionally important foods in tasty ways that we like. That's where we get satisfying from. So if we've had 3 meals in the day that we're filling, that's the protein and the fiber, some healthy fats, that's where we get filling from, that are nourishing. That's where all of those whole foods that have all the like vitamins and minerals and phytonutrients and essential fatty acids and essential amino acids that our bodies need, right? So nourishing and then satisfying because I made it in a way that was tasty to me, that catered to my flavor preferences. Then when we're putting in like in the room for our quality of life foods, right? The foods that are joy, the foods that in the olden days we used to think we weren't allowed to eat those foods. Now we're starting from a place where we're full and nourished and satisfied, right? So that's just going to like automatically mean that less of that food is going to hit all of the comfort and joy buttons. And we're going to be able to feel like we have, we're not like drawn, right? Like that instinctive compulsion to overeat, right? So that is like how we achieve both that higher diet quality and that permissive approach where we make room for any food. Every food can fit into a healthy diet, but not every food in any amount, right? So understanding the relative proportions and focusing on the additions and not at all on restrictions or subtractions, like that is how we achieve that higher diet quality that for many people will achieve healthy, sustainable weight loss. It will improve long-term health outcomes, but it also gets us out of the yo-yo, gets us out of that cycle because it's permissive and because it necessarily makes room for whatever foods you love, like the foods that are just joy, flavor, comfort, but also the foods that are convenient, that take, no time to prepare. So they're great when you slept in and you need something to eat for breakfast, or they are super easy to put on the table after you got home late at night, or they're your budget stretching foods, they're your cultural foods, your traditional foods, although many of those are going to fit into the nutrient dense category, not the quality of life category. But that is how we achieve the sustainability part of sustainable nutrition.
And avoid the harms of yo-yo dieting on our health.
And scene.
Dr. Sarah, where could we find more helpful resources in crafting this nutrient-dense, permissive dietary structure?
So my most comprehensive resource is my book, Nutrivore, The Radical New Science for Getting the Nutrients You Need from the Foods You Eat. This is the deepest dive into the psychology of restrictive dieting and how we adopt a permissive approach. And then what are those nutrient-dense, nourishing foods to focus on adding. So like, where are the priorities? So that is all in my book. But also, like, come check out my website, Nutrivore.com. That's a great place to start that more in-depth learning of what nutrients do in the body, how they might be linked to my specific health concerns, and then what types of foods have what types of nutrients and the relative amounts of those foods we want to eat to get the full range of nutrients that our bodies need. So different types of resources. This one is a lot more, I would say, practical, and a lot more comprehensive on the psychology piece. And the articles on the website are a lot more academic, but they're very complementary. So together, they make a really in-depth nutritional sciences education to inform our day-to-day choices.
Love that. Thank you so much, Dr. Sarah.
Thank you.